I stayed by her side from the days we built our company in a damp basement, all the way to the moment we rang the bell for our IPO. For 10 years, she climbed higher and higher in the world of capital, step by step, standing on my shoulders the entire way. Everyone thought she would eventually marry me, but on the very day the company went public, she walked into the spotlight holding her new lover's arm and publicly announced their engagement. "You're important to me," she said, "but he's the person I truly want." That was the moment I finally understood. I was never the man she loved. I was only the tool she used to change her fate, and since she treated me like a stepping stone, then I'd make her understand something too. In the world of capital, the one who loves first never wins. The one who wins is the one ruthless enough to take everything. Chapter 01. The celebration party on the top floor of the hotel didn't feel much like a celebration at all. "Aren't you going to explain this?" I walked up to Daniela and Robert, my eyes fixed on them. The blush on Daniela's face faded, replaced by the calm, composed expression I knew all too well. She gently patted the back of Robert's hand, signaling for him to wait, then stepped toward me. "Simon," she said in a lowered voice, "I'll explain everything later. This isn't the place for this conversation." "Then what is the right place?" I asked. Was it 10 years ago, when we were crammed into that leaking apartment, splitting a single cup of instant noodles? Or 5 years ago, when the company went bankrupt, and you held onto me crying, saying, "Simon, it's just us now"? With every sentence, Daniela's face turned a shade paler. Robert frowned and stepped forward half a pace, subtly positioning himself in front of her like some kind of protector. "President Koo, Daniela." Shut up. I didn't even look at him. My gaze remained locked on Daniela. "I'm asking her." Daniela took a deep breath and met my eyes directly. There was no softness left in them now, only resolve. "Simon Koo, I've told you before, you will always be the most important person to me, the one I trust the most." Her voice was clear and steady, the same tone she used in board meetings. "But some positions aren't yours just because you stayed the longest, or because you suffered together. Robert can give me a more stable future, a more respectable life, and our marriage will also benefit the group's next stage of expansion." I almost laughed from sheer disbelief. Every word she said drove straight into the softest part of my heart. I remembered all those late nights when she'd fall asleep against my shoulder, and I would stare at her exhausted face, silently swearing that one day I'd give her the best life possible. I remembered the times clients mocked her background and family status, and how she'd come back secretly wiping away tears. I had held her hand and told her that someday, we would stand so high that everyone else would have no choice but to look up at us. Turns out, the best I fought to build for her still wasn't respectable enough in her eyes. Turns out, the future I offered couldn't compare to a strategic marriage. At that moment, Robert wrapped an arm around Daniela's shoulders and spoke with the unmistakable tone of a winner. "President Koo, everyone remembers the bond you and Daniela built while starting the company together. The group will still need you moving forward. As for everything else, I hope you can understand and give us your blessing." Blessing. I looked at the hand resting on Daniela's shoulder, looked at the way she leaned slightly toward him, and suddenly, I let out a quiet laugh. The sound felt jarringly out of place in the suddenly silent ballroom. "Good, really good." I nodded and took a step back, my gaze slowly moving from Daniela's face to Robert, then across the surrounding crowd filled with awkwardness and curiosity. "Daniela, I spent 10 years beside you, from having absolutely nothing to ringing the bell at IPO. So tell me, what exactly was I to you?" Daniela pressed her lips together tightly. After a long silence, she finally gave the answer that froze my heart completely. "You are my most trusted business partner, the other half of Arion Group that can never be replaced. But Robert," she paused, her tone firm, "is the person most suited to stand beside me for the rest of my life." So that was it. 10 years of passion, sacrifice, sleepless nights, and standing by each other through hell and back. In the end, the label she filed it all under was simply business partner. I stared at her and suddenly felt that everything was absurd, so absurd that I no longer even had the strength to be angry. All that remained was an endless emptiness and coldness. I nodded once. Without saying another word, I turned and walked toward the exit of the ballroom. Behind me came Robert's hushed attempts to comfort her, and Daniela's quiet sigh. Chapter 2. I stepped into the elevator, shutting that suffocating sea of luxury and glittering lights behind me completely. The elevator descended, and the sensation of weightlessness hit. I leaned against the cold metal wall of the cabin, head tilted back as I watched the floor numbers flicker downward. 10 years of memories rewound through my mind like a broken film reel, her face illuminated by the dim lights of a rundown neighborhood while eating instant noodles. The night we landed our first major contract, crying and laughing together in the middle of an empty street at midnight. The financial crisis, when we mortgaged everything we owned and clung to each other in fear. And finally, tonight, her arm wrapped around another man as she announced her engagement. That unfamiliar expression on her face, shy, soft, Certain, the look of a woman completely devoted to someone. Suddenly, my stomach twisted violently. I bent over and dry heaved, but nothing came out. Only bitter acid burned its way through my throat. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. I straightened up, adjusted my crooked tie, and strode out into the freezing wind. My driver, Mason, pulled the car over. The moment he saw my face, he froze in alarm. President Koo, you, take me back to the apartment. I opened the car door and got in, my voice hoarse. Not the company, Miss Daniela just called, I said. Take me back to the apartment. I closed my eyes and cut him off. The car merged into traffic as the dazzling city lights streamed past outside the window. This city, the one we had spent 10 years conquering, now felt unbearably foreign and cold. I pulled out my phone. The screen still showed my chat history with Daniela from last night. Her final message read, "After tomorrow, everything's going to be a brand new beginning. Fighting. My President Koo." A brand new beginning. Yeah, brand new indeed. I turned off the screen and said to Mason in the front seat, "Pull over." Mason obeyed immediately. I pushed open the door and walked toward the riverside railing. The river was dark and endless, reflecting the brilliant skyline across the water. The shattered ripples of light looked just like my heart right now. 10 years. I had gone from a broke construction worker sleeping under bridges, to the CEO of a publicly listed company worth billions. I gave the woman I loved everything I could offer: fame, status, wealth, and the entirety of my sincerity, my future, my heart without reservation. And at the brightest moment of my life, she personally shoved me off the cliff, then stood at the edge beside the man who was more suitable, smiling and waving goodbye. The river wind was merciless, slicing across my face like knives. I pulled out a cigarette pack, shook one loose, and lit it. The ember glowed red in the darkness. Halfway through the cigarette, I took out my phone and dialed a number I rarely contacted. It rang 3 times before someone picked up. "Mr. Koo." The man's voice was calm and steady. "Caleb." I took another drag, watching the smoke scatter into the wind. "The insurance policy I asked you to prepare in secret 3 years ago. Is it still there?" There was a 2-second silence on the other end. "It's been maintained the entire time, just as instructed. Deep dormant status. Isolated contact chain. Absolute confidentiality. Activate it." I stared at the lights glowing from the top floor of the Ariane Group headquarters across the river and slowly spoke. Now. Chapter 3. I crushed the cigarette under my shoe, my fingertips turning pale from the force. "One more thing. Dig into 2 people, Daniela and Robert. I want every communication record, every money transfer, every private meeting, every project they've touched in the last 3 months. I paused, my voice growing colder. "No, the last 6 months. The more detailed, the better." "Understood," Caleb replied evenly. "The activation order will be issued tonight. You'll have the files by tomorrow evening at the latest." His voice remained perfectly calm, as though he had merely received an ordinary business instruction. Only he and I knew what this so-called insurance policy really was. 4 years ago, I had secretly set it up behind Daniela's back under my own name. At the time, it came from an instinctive distrust buried deep inside me, or perhaps a fear of how easily human nature bends in the face of massive interest. I had hired Caleb, one of the top experts in corporate intelligence and risk control, and through completely independent funding and channels, quietly planted people absolutely loyal to me in several of the group's most critical positions. They never participated in day-to-day operations. They only reported abnormalities to me at fixed intervals, a deeply buried corporate immune system. I never thought I would actually need to use it. At one point, I even believed I was simply being paranoid. How could Daniela ever betray me? We clawed our way out of hell together, but reality had delivered the hardest slap imaginable. "And another thing," I added, my voice as cold as the river wind. "Starting tomorrow, suspend all Ariane Group fund transfers requiring my final approval. Any documents needing my signature, hold them all. Use the excuse that I'm unwell and need complete rest." Caleb paused briefly. "Mr. Koo, this will trigger serious instability inside the group, especially right after the IPO. It's a highly sensitive period. Then let it shake." I cut him off. "And one more thing. Compile the gambling agreement we hold on Starglow Tech, and the evidence of Daniela privately investing in the Blue Ocean project through offshore shell companies. Organize everything and anonymously send it to the Securities Regulatory Commission and the Commercial Investigation Division. Monday morning, 9 sharp. Right when they start work. Starglow Tech was the golden project Daniela had pushed aggressively for. The risk-sharing agreement tied to it was dangerously reckless. If exposed, it would be enough to send Ariane Group's stock price crashing. As for the Blue Ocean project, that was a private cash cow she had hidden from the board entirely. The illegal fund movements and backdoor dealings involved were enough to bury her in scandal. All of it were safeguards I had secretly kept while cleaning up her messes over the years. Back then, I truly believed I would never need to use them. On the other end of the line, Caleb's breathing seemed to grow slightly heavier for a brief moment before returning to normal. Understood. I'll handle it immediately. After hanging up, I remained by the river for a long time, until the cold numbed my hands and feet completely. When I finally returned to the apartment, I took a freezing shower. The icy water poured over my body, but it couldn't wash away the wildfire of rage and the bone-deep pain twisting together inside me. I sat alone before the floor-to-ceiling windows in the empty living room, watching the city lights gradually go dark as dawn's pale gray light spread across the sky. The skyscraper we had spent 10 years building had collapsed in a single moment. Chapter 4. At dawn, I changed into a pure black suit and tied a dark crimson tie Daniela had never seen before. President Koo, where to? Mason's voice was as steady as ever. To the company. I fastened my cufflinks, my tone calm. We're attending the morning executive meeting. The atmosphere inside the top-floor conference room of Arion Group was heavy. The massive oval conference table was filled with senior executives and major shareholders. Daniela sat at the head of the table. Robert was there too, seated to her left, in a chair that used to remain empty. The moment I walked in, every gaze in the room shifted toward me at once. Surprise, curiosity, suspicion. Daniela looked up at me as if she wanted to say something. I ignored it completely and walked straight to the opposite end of the table, taking my seat directly across from her. Let's begin. I opened the folder in front of me, my voice utterly emotionless. The meeting proceeded routinely as each department reported on post-IPO operations. But everyone could tell the people who truly mattered weren't focused on the reports at all. Finally, the CFO hesitantly began discussing liquidity. President Daniela, President Koo, regarding the second payment for the overseas acquisition. Postpone it. Without even looking up, I cut him off. The conference room instantly fell silent. Daniela frowned and turned toward me. Simon, we already agreed on the payment schedule with the other party. Delaying it could damage our credibility and even cause the acquisition to collapse. Then let it collapse. I closed the folder and raised my eyes to meet hers. At this stage, the group needs to preserve liquidity to handle post-listing market volatility. All non-essential large expenditures are suspended. That's my decision. But this acquisition was approved by the board. Her voice sharpened with irritation. I'm the chairman. I answered flatly. I have veto power. Or does Daniela think this business partner no longer has the right to speak on company decisions? Daniela's face turned pale. Clearly, she hadn't expected me to confront her so directly in public. Under the table, Robert gently squeezed her hand before speaking in his usual mild tone. President Koo makes a fair point. Stability should come first during the early IPO phase. Daniela, perhaps we should reevaluate the risks. I looked at the hand resting over hers, then suddenly smiled. And in what capacity is Mr. Robert attending Arion Group's senior executive meeting? A shareholder? A board member? Or, I paused slightly, Daniela's fiancé? The smile on Robert's face stiffened instantly. Daniela abruptly stood up. Simon, do you really have to do this? Robert is he's just here to learn, right? I finished the sentence for her, leaning back in my chair. I slowly swept my gaze across the room. Everyone, allow me to introduce Mr. Robert. He is Daniela's newly engaged fiancé. He'll likely become more involved in group affairs moving forward. You should all get acquainted in advance. A wave of suppressed gasps and whispers spread through the conference room. Clearly, not everyone had known beforehand. Or perhaps they knew, but never expected me to expose it like this. Daniela's chest rose and fell sharply as she stared at me. Her eyes were filled with disappointment, anger, and a trace of grievance I could no longer understand. Simon, we'll talk privately. She practically forced the words through clenched teeth. Fine. I stood up. Meeting adjourned. Then I looked directly at her. Daniela, my office. Now. Chapter 5. My office was on the other side of the hallway. Slightly smaller than hers, but with a far better view. I walked inside without sitting down, simply standing before the floor-to-ceiling windows with my back facing the door. Daniela followed me in and shut the door behind her. What exactly are you trying to do? Her voice carried both exhaustion and anger. That acquisition is critical for our expansion into the European market. You know that better than anyone. And what you did to Robert during the meeting, you completely humiliated him. The kickback you privately promised the middleman for that acquisition deal. I didn't turn around as I spoke. Was it 5%? Or 8%? The room instantly fell silent behind me. Slowly, I turned around. Daniela stood frozen by the door, her face drained of color as though she'd just been punched head-on. How do you know that? Her voice trembled slightly. How I know isn't important. I walked behind my desk and sat down like an interrogator. What matters is this. Daniela, when did you start learning to use the company's money to pave the road for yourself? Or for that perfectly suitable fiancé of yours? I didn't. Daniela hurried toward the desk, both hands bracing against its edge. her eyes already reddening. That kickback is standard industry practice. And the company would have benefited in the end. Simon, believe me, I never intended to harm the group. We built this company together. Together. I repeated the word slowly, finding it unbearably ironic. Daniela, the moment you walked into that banquet holding Robert's arm and announced your engagement, there stopped being an us. There's only you, and me, and your Robert. So this really is about that. It was as if she had finally found the core issue, and her emotions surged instantly. Fine, I admit I handled it badly. I should have told you earlier. But Simon, we've been together for 10 years. 10 whole years. Doesn't what we have matter more than a marriage certificate? Marrying Robert is simply the most suitable choice. You'll always be the most important person in my life. We can still stay the way we always were. The way we always were. I cut her off, my voice colder than ice. Watching you go home every night to sleep beside another man. Watching the two of you appear everywhere together while the whole world blesses your marriage. And meanwhile, I continue being your most important partner. Working myself to death for you. Making money for you. Protecting your empire and your perfect marriage. I stood up and walked toward her, staring directly into her eyes. I asked word by word. Daniela, what exactly do you take me for? A dog. One you can summon whenever you want, throw away whenever you're done, and one that'll still guard your house and wag its tail for you afterward. No. How could you think that? Tears finally spilled down her face. What we have is love, family, a bond beyond any label or form. Why do you insist on measuring everything through marriage? Why can't you understand me? I need a more stable, more respectable marriage. Is that wrong? Does that really have to change what exists between us? Understand you. I let out a low laugh filled with exhaustion and bitterness. Daniela, I understand you far too well. You always knew exactly what I wanted. That's why you dared to hurt me this recklessly. Because you were certain that no matter what you did, I would understand you, support you, forgive you, and stay beside you like a loyal dog forever. Isn't that right? No. Daniela shook her head desperately, tears streaming down her cheeks. Simon, don't do this. Can't we just talk properly, like we used to? Used to? I took a step back, widening the distance between us as if she carried some contagious disease. Daniela, there is no used to anymore. The Simon from before died the moment you announced your engagement at that celebration banquet. The man standing in front of you now is Arion Group's chairman, your business partner, and the enemy who is about to tear apart you. Your perfect marriage, and everything the two of you want. Daniela's entire body trembled. She stared at me in disbelief. Enemy? You said, enemy? She repeated weakly, all color gone from her face. Yes. I looked at her expressionlessly. Enemy. So save your tears, and save that nonsense about love transcending labels. From this day forward, it's strictly business. I walked back behind my desk and pressed the intercom button. Secretary, escort Mr. Robert out of the Arion Group building. He is not an employee without authorization. He is prohibited from entering executive office areas, and if he refuses to cooperate, call security. Chapter 6. Simon. Daniela screamed. I hung up the intercom and looked at her calmly. Daniela, if there's nothing else, please return to your office. As for the acquisition payment suspension, I'll have the risk control department issue a new evaluation report. Until that report is completed, all funds remain frozen. That is the final decision. Daniela stared at me intensely, her chest rising and falling violently. Those eyes that once held my entire world were now filled with shock, anger, hurt, and something painfully unfamiliar. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something, but in the end, no words came out. She spun around abruptly, yanked open the door, and stormed out. The door slammed shut behind her with a deafening bang. I remained standing motionless until the sound of her footsteps disappeared down the hallway. A few minutes later, the internal line rang. The secretary's cautious voice came through. President Koo, Robert has already left the building, however. President Daniela is very upset. She returned to her office and hasn't come out since. Also, Director Wang from Finance and Director Liu from Investments came by earlier. They seem to want to speak with you. I'm not seeing anyone. I cut her off. If anyone comes looking for me, tell them I'm unwell and need complete rest. All documents requiring my signature are to be held. Urgent matters can be handled through email. Yes, President Koo. After hanging up, I sat back down and opened my laptop. The cold blue glow of the screen illuminated my face. Caleb's email was already waiting silently in my inbox. Attached were summaries of nearly every communication record, financial transaction, and overlapping travel itinerary involving Daniela and Robert over the past 6 months. The evidence was horrifying. So they had reconnected as early as half a year ago, perhaps even earlier. Those so-called business trips, college reunions, and meetings with investors she mentioned. Robert had been present for many of them. Robert's family business had recently been suffering from severe cash flow problems, and through a series of complex operations, Daniela had been quietly funneling Arion Group's premium resources and liquidity toward them. That acquisition deal was likely just one piece of the plan. So this was her definition of suitable, of stable and respectable, of beneficial to the group. Nothing more than a carefully calculated exchange of interest, and a merciless betrayal of the 10 years I gave her sincerely. I moved the mouse and opened another encrypted folder. Inside was everything Caleb had secretly gathered over the years regarding Daniela's gray area business dealings, along with the dirty secrets and leverage tied to several key shareholders and executives within the group. Once upon a time, these files were meant to be Daniela's shield, her safety net. Now, they had become the sharpest blades in my hands. I took a deep breath and began typing. The first email went to several veteran shareholders who had long been dissatisfied with Daniela's aggressive investment strategies. Attached were preliminary screenshots proving irregularities within the project operations. The second order went to one of my embedded insurance operatives inside the finance department. He was instructed to launch a secret audit into every major fund transfer Daniela had handled, with special focus on transactions connected to Robert's family business. The third call was placed to the overseas law firm that had worked closely with us for years. Under my personal name, I commissioned them to re-examine the risk-sharing agreement with Starglow Tech, to uncover every possible legal loophole and exposure point. I knew it would take time, but corporate warfare wasn't like gang shootouts. There were no gunshots, no blood splattered across the floor, yet it was every bit as deadly, every bit as cruel. I needed patience. I wanted the traitors to watch everything they had built begin rotting from the inside out. I wanted Daniela to understand the price of throwing away someone's genuine heart, and I wanted Robert to learn that some things were never his to touch. Chapter 7. Over the next few days, dangerous undercurrents spread through the entire group. Using medical leave as an excuse, I almost completely disappeared from public view. Every instruction was issued either through email or Caleb's private channels. Daniela tried several times to speak with me. Each attempt was blocked by one excuse or another. She raised objections during board meetings, but several veteran shareholders who had received my emails suddenly adopted ambiguous attitudes, and with my chairman veto power still intact, every proposal she pushed forward ended in failure. The effects of the frozen funds soon became obvious. Several key projects stalled. Partners and investors began voicing complaints. After the brief surge following the IPO, Arion Group's stock price started showing signs of instability. Daniela had clearly realized something was wrong. She began using her authority as CEO to bypass me and move funds independently. But the people embedded in the insurance network quietly blocked her at every turn. She privately approached several shareholders. The responses she received were vague and evasive. She even tried contacting me through my personal number. Long messages flooded in one after another, from reminiscing about the past, to angry accusations. And finally, pleading, "Simon, can we meet and talk properly, please? Let's stop hurting each other like this. What exactly do you want? Just tell me. If it's something I can do, I'll do it. Don't destroy the company we spent 10 years building, please." I read every message, then expressionlessly deleted them, and blocked her number. Hurting each other. When you stab a knife into someone's heart while smiling at them, how can you still ask why they're bleeding? 1 week later, Caleb finally sent word. The critical loopholes in the Starglow Tech gambling agreement had been identified. The evidence chain was nearly complete. At the same time, the anonymous reports regarding Daniela's illegal involvement in the Blue Ocean project had already been delivered through special channels, landing directly on the desks of both the Securities Regulatory Commission and a notoriously ruthless investigator within the Commercial Investigation Division. The report intentionally avoids direct evidence, Caleb explained over the encrypted call, but the direction is extremely clear. It's enough to trigger a formal investigation. Once the investigation begins, Arion Group's stock price will inevitably plunge. As the primary person responsible, Daniela will at minimum face an internal investigation. She could even be temporarily suspended. And once the investigation expands, it'll inevitably drag in Robert's family business. With their current cash flow problems, they probably won't survive any major turbulence. Good. I stared out at the gloomy sky beyond the windows. Add more fuel to the fire. Leak information to several influential financial media outlets. Suggest that Robert's family business has been trying to siphon Arion Group resources through Daniela and shift their financial risks onto us. No hard proof, just enough implication. Understood. Caleb paused briefly before continuing. One more thing, Mr. Koo. The people watching Robert reported that he recently met privately with representatives from White Cloud's capital. It appears he's seeking new financing to deal with his family company's crisis. And White Cloud's. They've always been interested in the East City land parcel we previously secured. White Cloud's capital, our old rival, Find a way to let Daniela accidentally discover those meetings. My voice turned icy. Have it leak through someone close to her. Make it sound unintentional. Yes, sir. After hanging up, I walked to the liquor cabinet and poured myself another drink. Chapter 8. The plan was moving forward step by step. I should have felt satisfied, thrilled by revenge, but I didn't. Inside me there was only a cold, endless emptiness. 10 years, more than 3,000 days and nights. Those memories couldn't simply be erased. The days we survived on stale bread together, the nights we slept on the office floor, the moments we held each other for warmth while standing at the edge of despair. Those moments of genuine warmth had once truly existed, and now they repeatedly stabbed into a heart that was already torn apart beyond repair. I hated her so much my bones felt cold, but no, I couldn't think about that anymore. Once the arrow leaves the bow, there's no turning back. A few more days passed, then the storm finally began showing its true power. First came a vague article in a major financial magazine. First, there was a vaguely worded report in a financial weekly magazine, mentioning that a newly listed star company was suspected of internal tunneling of benefits, with the related parties involving another cash-strapped family business. No names were mentioned, but anyone inside the industry immediately knew who it referred to. Soon after, officials from the Securities Regulatory Commission and the Commercial Investigation Division made a routine visit to Arion Group. Though it was only a preliminary inquiry, word spread instantly. Panic began growing inside the company. The stock price plunged accordingly. At last, Daniela could no longer sit still. She rushed directly to the apartment building where I lived. After security stopped her, she stood downstairs screaming my name, her voice hoarse with desperation. I stood before the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at that tiny, frantic figure below. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup ruined. None of the elegance and composure she once carried remained. She looked like nothing more than an ordinary woman with nowhere left to go. Once upon a time, she had been the person I wanted to protect most in this world. Now, I was the one who had personally driven her to this point. I watched for a long time, until she finally lost strength and was forcibly dragged away by Robert, who had rushed over after hearing the news. Before leaving, Robert looked up toward my window. His eyes were dark and venomous, filled with hatred. I closed the curtains. That night, I received a text from an unfamiliar number. It was Daniela. Simon, do you really hate me this much? So much that you're willing to destroy everything we built together with our own hands. Something happened on Robert's side. His father had a heart attack from stress and was hospitalized. Are you satisfied now? What exactly will it take for you to stop? I stared at the message. In my mind appeared her hysterical expression, and Robert's poisonous gaze. Satisfied? No, not even close. I replied with a single word, break it off. Then I blocked the number again. Break off the engagement. End things with Robert. That was the last, and only, chance I was willing to give her, though I already knew she would never accept it. Her pride, her obsession with respectability and the right choice, the costs she had already invested, and perhaps even the lingering feelings she still had for Robert, none of it would allow her to back down. As expected, no response ever came. Fine. A few more days later, an even bigger explosion hit. First, the details of Star Glow Technologies' valuation adjustment agreement were deeply analyzed by a certain influential financial blogger, who pointed out the enormous hidden risks and unequal terms within it, directly accusing Arion Group's investment department of negligence and even suggesting possible exchanges of benefits. Arion's stock price plunged again. Immediately afterward, rumors about Daniela's irregular operations in the Blue Ocean Project and her suspected improper transfer of benefits spread like wildfire. Although there was no official, solid proof, it was enough to make investors vote with their feet. Pressure inside the board of directors reached a breaking point. Several veteran shareholders jointly demanded an emergency meeting to discuss Daniela's position as CEO. Meanwhile, over at Robert's family business, after White Cloud's Capital accidentally leaked news that they were desperately seeking financing and were even willing to sell off core technologies, their already fragile supply chain collapsed completely. Banks began aggressively demanding repayment. Partners turned against them one after another. The company was now on the verge of total ruin, and Robert's father, according to the rumors, really had suffered a stroke from rage and was now in the ICU. When the wall collapses, everyone rushes forward to push it down harder, and I simply watched the inferno I had personally ignited consume everything they once treasured, little by little. Chapter 9. Late that night, the doorbell to my apartment started ringing frantically. Standing outside was Robert. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair a mess, his suit wrinkled beyond recognition. The refined and elegant image he usually carried was completely gone. Now he looked like a wild animal cornered with nowhere left to run. Simon, you fucking psycho, bastard. The moment the door opened, he tried to charge inside, But Mason and another bodyguard immediately restrained him. I leaned against the doorway and looked at him coldly. Need something? Was it you? Was all of this you? Robert roared, veins bulging from his forehead. Whistleblower letter, the media leaks, and white clouds. That was all you, wasn't it? You're trying to destroy Daniela, destroy Ariane, destroy my family too. You scheming piece of shit, if you've got the guts, come at me directly. Come at you directly. I laughed softly, though there wasn't a trace of warmth in it. Robert, I think you misunderstand something. From beginning to end, I was never targeting you. You and Daniela's greed destroyed yourselves. Tell me, which part of those reports was false? Did Daniela illegally manipulate the Blue Ocean Project or not? Did your family try to siphon resources out of Ariane through her or not? And wasn't that gambling agreement with Star Glow Tech a ticking time bomb from the start? All I did was drag your actions into the light. Robert was left speechless. He could only glare at me viciously while breathing heavily. As for you, I stepped closer, my gaze icy as it swept across him. A useless rich kid who's never accomplished anything on his own. A man who survives by exploiting women's feelings and resources. You really think someone like you is worth me personally targeting? You. Robert completely lost control. He struggled violently, but the bodyguards held him firmly in place. Simon, don't get too smug. He screamed hoarsely. The person Daniela loves is me. The one she chose is me. Even if you destroy everything, you'll still never get her. You'll always be a loser. A pathetic man she abandoned. The words hit like a poison knife, driving directly into the deepest wound inside me. The muscles in my face twitched slightly, but only for a moment. Then calm returned. Love. I repeated the word slowly, my tone dripping with mockery. Robert, do you and she really have something as precious as love between you? She chose you because you satisfy the pathetic inferiority buried deep inside her. And you chose her because you wanted Ariane Group, and the lifeline your family desperately needed. I looked at him coldly. You really are perfect for each other. I waved my hand dismissively, signaling for the bodyguards to drag him away. Throw him out, and from now on, don't let him come anywhere near this place again. Simon, you won't die peacefully. You'll get what's coming to you. Robert's curses echoed through the hallway before gradually fading into the distance. I shut the door, then slowly slid down against the cold surface until I was sitting on the floor. Sharp pain pulsed violently from where my heart should have been. Loser. Pathetic. He was right. When it came to love, I had lost completely, utterly. But soon enough, the pain was swallowed once again by something colder. Hatred. I would not remain a pathetic fool forever. I would become the man who personally brought all of this to its end. Chapter 10. A few days later, Ariane Group convened an emergency board meeting. I attended. It was my first public appearance since the scandal erupted. The atmosphere in the conference room was so suffocating it felt tangible. Every director and senior executive was present. Daniela sat across from me, her face pale, heavy dark circles shadowing her eyes, yet her back remained perfectly straight, as if she were desperately clinging to the last shred of dignity she had left. Robert wasn't there. He wasn't qualified to attend. The meeting went straight to the heart of the matter, whether Daniela should remain CEO, and how the company should respond to the current crisis. Several veteran shareholders struck first. Their words sharp and merciless. They directly accused Daniela of a string of disastrous decisions and suspected violations that had caused enormous losses and a devastating reputational crisis for the group. They demanded her immediate resignation and a full internal investigation. Daniela fought back fiercely, shifting part of the blame onto market conditions and claiming that some of the issues stemmed from malicious attacks and internal sabotage. Her gaze swept toward me several times, burning with anger and accusation. I remained silent the entire time, lightly tapping my fingers against the table until everyone had finished speaking. I agree with Chairman Wang and Chairman Li. I finally spoke. My voice was calm, not loud. Yet the entire conference room fell silent instantly. Daniela's head snapped toward me, her pupils shrinking in disbelief, unable to believe I would actually say those words myself. As CEO, MS. Daniela's recent actions have indeed caused immeasurable losses and risks to the group. Before the Securities Commission and the Commercial Crime Bureau reach their final conclusions, and in order to stabilize the situation and reassure investors, I propose that all of MS Daniela's CEO duties be suspended immediately, with Vice President Chang serving as acting CEO temporarily. At the same time, the group will establish an independent investigation team to conduct a thorough inquiry into all related matters. I finished in one breath, my tone completely professional. Simon. Daniela shot to her feet, her voice trembling with emotion. How dare you? What right do you have to do this? Ariane Group was built by the two of us together. Without me, there would be no Ariane today. Because I am the chairman, and I hold the largest voting shares. I raised my eyes and looked at her calmly, my gaze as cold as if I were staring at a stranger. And because your actions right now are destroying the Arion that we built together. Daniela. Separating business from personal matters, that's what you taught me. Separating business from personal matters. Daniela laughed. The sound was sharp, desperate, almost broken. Simon, you're only doing this because I chose Robert instead of you, aren't you? You're getting revenge. You're using these dirty tactics to destroy me. You ruined me. Ruined Arion. What exactly do you gain from this? I gain justice. I met her nearly furious gaze and answered word by word. I gain accountability to the shareholders, the employees, and this company we built. As for you and Robert, I paused, my eyes sweeping across the room. That is your private matter. It has nothing to do with this board meeting. In the end, the proposal went to a vote. Under my leadership, and with the support of several veteran board members, the motion passed by an overwhelming majority. Daniela was immediately suspended from her position as CEO and ordered to cooperate with the investigation. It was as if all the strength had been drained from her body. She collapsed back into her chair, her face deathly pale, unable to say another word. After the meeting adjourned and everyone had left, only the two of us remained, separated by the long empty conference table. Slowly, she lifted her head to look at me. Her eyes were bloodshot, but there were no tears left in them, only barren hatred. Simon, you won. Her voice was painfully hoarse. I never wanted to compete with you. I stood up and adjusted my suit jacket. You were the one who turned us into a war. Why? She murmured softly, as if asking me, or perhaps asking herself, how did we end up like this? We were supposed to. There is no us anymore. Daniela. I cut her off. My voice carried nothing but exhaustion and cold finality. From now on, you are you, and I am me. I will take over Arion Group. As for you and Robert, take care of yourselves. After saying that, I didn't look at her again. I turned and walked toward the door. Simon. She called out behind me, her voice shrill with despair. I never stopped walking. You'll regret this. You'll regret this someday. Chapter 11. I pushed the door open and walked out. Regret? Maybe. But compared to regret, what frightened me more was spending the rest of my life trapped in the shadow of betrayal, living forever inside the pitiful shell of that business partner. After Daniela was suspended, the investigation team moved in immediately. Without her interference, and with the perfectly timed evidence Caleb provided, the illegal operations behind the Blue Ocean project were quickly exposed. The evidence was undeniable. The massive risks hidden within Star Glow Tech's high-stakes investment agreement were completely uncovered, and the enormous potential losses finally surfaced. Robert's side collapsed even harder. Under pressure from all directions, his company officially declared bankruptcy and entered liquidation. His father didn't survive the shock and passed away in the ICU. Robert himself was taken in for investigation on suspicion of financial crimes. Rumor had it that, in desperation, he even tried to drag Daniela down with him, but there wasn't enough evidence. When the wall falls, everyone pushes it. The once glorious rich heir had, in the blink of an eye, become a stray dog with nowhere to go, a prisoner awaiting judgment. Daniela tried to use the last of her resources to salvage the situation. She even attempted to negotiate terms with me, but I refused to see her. Her shares plummeted after the series of scandals, and her influence within the board dropped to almost nothing. Meanwhile, with Caleb's support, I quickly stabilized the company from within. Although the stock price suffered through painful turbulence, the foundation of the group remained intact. If anything, after cutting away the rot, Arion began to show signs of new life. I officially assumed the role of acting CEO and took full control of the group's operations. No one mentioned Daniela anymore. Her name, and that entire chapter of the past, became an unspoken taboo within Arion Group. 3 months later, on a gloomy rainy afternoon, I received a call from the detention center. Robert wanted to see me, so I went. Separated by the thick glass, he sat there wearing a prison uniform, unshaven, his eye sockets hollow and sunken. In just a few months, he seemed to have aged 20 years. The handsome, refined image he once carried was completely gone, leaving behind only lifeless exhaustion. He picked up the phone and looked at me. His first words were, "Are you satisfied now?" I said nothing. My family's finished, my father's dead, and now I'm in here. He tugged at the corner of his mouth, trying to smile, but it looked uglier than crying. Daniela's ruined too. Her reputation's destroyed. She lost everything. Simon, you won. You won completely. I told you before. I never wanted to win. My voice remained calm. This was the road you chose yourselves. The road we chose. Robert suddenly became agitated, his voice rising sharply. Simon, don't pretend your hands are clean. If you hadn't pushed us so hard, if you hadn't used all those underhanded tactics, how would things have ended up like this? How could Daniela have? I pushed you. I cut him off, my voice turning cold. Did I force Daniela to announce her engagement at the celebration banquet? Did I force you to covet Arion's resources? Did I force Daniela into illegal operations? Did I force the two of you to treat marriage like a bargaining chip for interest? Robert fell silent. He could only glare at me viciously. Robert, you still don't understand. I looked at him as though he were nothing more than a pathetic stranger. The thing that destroyed you was never me. It was your greed, your schemes, your selfishness, and the way you trampled over 10 years of my sincerity. The two of you brought this upon yourselves. After saying that, I put down the phone. Without looking at the twisted expression on his face, I turned and walked away. The cold rain hit my face as I stepped out of the detention center. Mason walked over and opened an umbrella. President Koo, back to the company. Take me somewhere else. I had Mason drive to the cemetery in the western outskirts of the city. At the foot of the hill, I bought a bouquet of white chrysanthemums. Alone beneath a black umbrella, I walked slowly up the slippery stone steps. Rain tapped steadily against the umbrella, producing a dull, monotonous sound. The entire world was shrouded in gray haze, and even the outline of the distant city had become blurred. Chapter 12. At a quiet corner halfway up the mountain, I found my mother's grave. In the photograph on the tombstone, she was still young, her smile gentle and warm. I placed the flowers down, crouched beside the grave, and carefully wiped the raindrops from the photo with my sleeve. Mom. I came to see you. I spoke softly, my voice quickly dissolving into the rain. I feel like I've done a lot of things. Some of them I don't even know whether they were right or wrong, but I don't regret them. I'm just a little tired. The rain gradually became heavier, soaking the cuffs of my pants. I remained crouched there before her grave, staring at my mother's photograph for a long, long time. By the time I walked back down the mountain, the rain had eased a little. At the entrance of the cemetery, I unexpectedly saw a familiar figure, Daniela, holding an old umbrella. She stood alone by the roadside, seemingly waiting for a car as well. She had lost a frightening amount of weight. Clothes that once fit her perfectly now hung loosely from her frame. Her face carried an unhealthy pallor, and her hollow eyes stared blankly into the curtain of rain ahead. She hadn't noticed me. The car was parked not far away. Mason looked toward me silently, asking for instructions with his eyes. I shook my head, signaling for him to wait. Standing beneath the eaves, separated by the endless drizzle, I looked at the woman who had once occupied my entire life, yet now felt no different from a stranger. Inside my heart, that barren wasteland seemed to be drowning beneath an even heavier storm. Cold and lifeless, without the slightest trace of warmth left. She never obtained the respectable marriage and stable future she wanted, and I never obtained the sincerity and lifelong devotion I had longed for. We had both lost the most precious thing we possessed. Perhaps this was the fairest ending possible for a 10-year entanglement like ours. After an unknown amount of time, a taxi finally arrived. Daniela got in and disappeared into the rain. Let's go. I turned and got into the car, closing my eyes as I leaned back against the seat. The engine started. The car drove away from the cemetery, toward the city center, toward the towering Arion Group headquarters that pierced the clouds. There, another long battle awaited me, a battle that belonged to me alone, and had only just begun. But I was no longer the same Simon I used to be, the Simon who would throw himself recklessly into love, who would bare his heart and soul for someone else, had already died on the night of the IPO celebration banquet. The one who survived was the ruler of Arion Group, a man whose heart had been forged into steel through betrayal. Outside the car window, the city lights and streets sped backward in blurred streaks. The windshield wipers moved rhythmically, clearing away layer after layer of a world that looked both sharp and hazy at the same time. My phone vibrated once. It was an encrypted message from Caleb. Mr. Koo, the evaluation report regarding the acquisition of several core patents from Robert's family after their bankruptcy is complete. Their value is considerable. In addition, the European side we contacted earlier is highly interested in cooperation and proposes a video conference next week. I picked up my phone and replied simply, arrange the meeting. Proceed with the patent acquisition as planned. After sending the message, I turned off the screen. The dark reflection staring back at me wore almost no expression at all. The revenge was over. Life, however, continued. It was just that from this moment on, in my world, there would only be myself.